Working in the new building. So how's everything going?
I'm good, man. How's everything?
All right, all right. I'm just gonna share out the screen and we'll go through your stuff first because you're the first one here. See who else shows up. And I'm actually going to drag this window over here so I can kind of have two operational windows here. And open a new window. That's not what I'm looking to do. I'm looking at a new window. All right, so get that done there. Boom. All right, so I want to make sure I'm showing the right window. Been having a little bit of audio trouble here the last couple of days, so that's why I'm making sure that's there. Leave that up there. Mute that just so it's viewable. And then over here, we're doing StreamYard. StreamYard. Okay, good. We're sharing the window of that one, which should show Google in a second. Okay, good. So it's showing the right screen. All right. So the first thing I want to do on this new computer is log into, and this is going to be different for those of you in the Western PA or other boards. This is not necessarily the same on every software. This is the Flex MLS version, obviously, but it's going to be kind of similar. Fine. So to list a property, and we'll also cover the dot loop process very briefly as well. So I'm going to get that open in a second. So to list a property is fairly simple, and so I've done Bright MLS, which is the same company as Matrix. So Bright MLS covers roughly Allentown South, and oddly enough, with Bright MLS, the same database covers all the way down to Virginia. So if we put something on Bright, and I'd have to re-up my membership there because we don't use it a lot, but if we put something on Bright, everyone down to Virginia will see it. And if you have any deals all the way down there, we can use that as comps. We're also a member of something called My State MLS, which I may not renew if we don't use it. It's like a national MLS. They're trying to be a competitor in the market. And that also could be an interesting draw for data. I don't think they're that much penetrated into Pennsylvania yet, but whatever. So Flex has, let's see, I think Erie board is Flex, Scranton and the 5 boards around us are Flex. And if you're a member of Scranton or any of the Scranton, Luzerne, Wayne Pike, a couple others, I forget, but they all share databases. If you're a member of one, your stuff shows up everywhere within this universe up here. So you go add listing, and this has changed. They keep changing this a little bit, but you pick your topic category, and pretty much it's paint by numbers. Listing number, me, address, unit number, and you pretty much paint by number. Through here, and you answer the prompts that come. There will be prompts when you get into the listing. There will be prompts that are required and prompts that are not. I'm actually going to change this to one of my properties just so I don't screw somebody else up. Confirm location. Now, if it's smart, it's going to yell at me because I already have an existing pending sitting there. It has the ability to pulling tax records. It can pull property details. It can pull media only in circumstances where you're the listing agent on the other deal, on the other appearance of it. This is for if you're renewing an expired or some such thing. I don't know why it didn't find that there was already there's a pending listing that I've left up for shows like this. But anyway, So you pretty much have your picture, your pictures, your floor plans, your documents, videos, and visual tours. This is where all the meat and potatoes happen. You can enter the tax ID number, and it can try to draw the property records. I find that, occasional to work. I don't find that to work all that often. It does want something, so you can just put in zeros. It won't let you go further usually without that. And then you answer your questions here. And this is where the long series of questions begin. And what I find, yes, you're supposed to measure all your rooms. You're supposed to do all that. What I find is look at the last listing. Pull up whoever had it listed before, and a lot of your stuff will be there. The school district probably, you need to verify. This is your responsibility to verify, don't just copy. But the room measurements are probably there. Double check that they're right, but they're probably there. A heating system type is probably there. School district.
What happens if you don't have the room measurements?
It will usually require you to enter something. So Scranton gets a little cranky, and I don't know if it's simply a board thing or maybe it's something from higher up. But if you don't have the room count, if you give a room count and the number of rooms you describe, because under details you're going to be describing all these questionnaires, and then under rooms, if you tell it's 5 rooms, it's going to look for 5 rooms over here. And that's why I always go back to the previous listing, because I'm not type A enough to carry a tape measure with me, although I do usually have a laser. Basically, how do I put this? Basically, Scranton will usually force you to enter something, but you want to be correct, but you can be approximate, because it says at the bottom of every listing, measurements, everything is approximate, verify it yourself, or whatever it says, believed to be accurate, but it has some sort of an excuse at the bottom of every listing. So you want to be close. Like I'm looking at my little bathroom in this particular office space, and it's probably a 5x7. Well, if I call that a 6x8, no one's going to care. I call that a 10x20, and someone's going to be like, "What were you smoking?" So you want to be as reasonable as you can, and that's where the previous listing usually comes in handy. Things like PIN numbers, they never change. Things like zoning, okay, that doesn't never change, but probably never, really never changes. So you can usually, school district, unlikely that's changed. You need to verify if you're stealing from a previous listing. What you cannot steal is the pictures. You should not steal their description. And you should go and do your due diligence. But a lot of that mundane stuff you can either find on the previous listing, you can find it on the county website. In the case of Lackawanna County and a little bit in Luzerne County, their county website sucks. I like using Times Leader assessment database for a lot of stuff in Luzerne County, because the county website I think they've even gone to a subscription model or something. But anyway, so it will nail you on what they require that you don't have answers to. Like if you don't answer directions. Directions is obviously an outdated concept in the years of GPS, but still, end of Main Street, take a left onto Blackman Street, whatever. It has a certain small number minimum of characters. Okay, 400 isn't that minimum, but it wants that. It won't let you go past without that. You have the option of saving the incomplete listing if you don't have what you need. And then, of course, if you have what you need, you can add listing. Once you add listing, it's going live. So if you're not ready, like you're still in negotiation with the seller, whatever you're preparing or whatever, save incomplete until you're ready. Couple things that have gotten me in trouble before. One is don't send out a coming soon. If you send out a coming soon message on the board's email system, I think it's called email. Yeah, MLS email. You have something like 24 hours to get it actually there, not just coming soon anymore, or there's like a $300 fine. If you don't put up enough pictures, say you have a deal you don't have pictures for, you have a certain number of time, and then they start threatening and possibly giving fines. If you, for whatever reason, can't get pictures, you have the seller sign a release. if you don't have, there's certain things the board will message, and of course, if you whatever, they'll message me and you and say, hey, you've got X amount of time to fix this, or else. They've hit me with one or two times I've done something, and they've just been like, you've done this twice on 2 different listings. Here's a fine. But for the most part, you fix it. Tax book number, they require it, but oddly enough, zeros get you out of it. You want to answer as accurately as possible, and there's no reason not to put a tax book number in there, but whatever. I don't know. It's weird. Like land lease is not a requirement, but waterfront is. And of course, you're picking, your type of property is one of your most important drop downs, residential, whatever. So you go through all of this, and then when you add it, and I'm gonna go out to change listing to go back to show you. Oh, they must have removed my like Grove Street, which was my sort of parking listing. But and it may not let me change. Okay, so it shows the same menu items. Obviously, it's a closed property, so changing stuff is kind of hinky. But you'll have the ability to do everything else: map locations, listing selling members, photos, floor plans, change list price, change your status. If for some reason you absolutely had to change your status, I'm not sure why you do that after a sale, but whatever. So that's pretty much it. And there is a much more expansive listing module in here. One of my previous videos on listings, I did spend like a half an hour on that. Just want to see if anybody else joined the party. Not yet. Okay, fine. So basically, that's how and where did Flex go? Flex went here. So basically, that's what you want to be filling in, and you're going to want to be as obviously as accurate as you can. Also, when stealing from previous listings, no copyrighted information should be taken, obviously, like pictures or their write-ups or whatever. And make sure you check if it's real. If you say it's a 3-bedroom and they subdivided a bedroom and made it a 4, or went the other way, they took 2 tiny bedrooms and made 1. Make sure you're correcting what's not the same. So selectively kind of, if you're borrowing, borrow carefully is what I'm saying. Check what you're borrowing. Also, from my own experience, double check when you enter your listing price. There was a time when I listed something and it was supposed to be $482,000. Well, somehow I must have not pushed the 4 hard enough, and it went up as $82,000. So obviously I had a line of horses down the block. So just double check your stuff before it launches or immediately after it launches. The only problem is if you screw up and hit launch and then you change it, the world is in the history module of your listing. The world is going to see your first version and your second version, and you will get questions as to why you changed it. So just, if you do change something, be ready. Now, within that, there's something called the hot list, and you should. And I have expired listing subscriptions that I never look at because I don't wish to list property. I'm happy to forward those out to you, and you can chase down those expireds. And the trick with those is you want to chase down the ones that just happened. But also, any change to your listing makes it reappear on the hot list. You put in a new listing, and boom, there it is, active. It pops up as a change, and everyone's email gets, "Hey, here's what changed. You changed the list price. You changed something of most of the categories." And it'll show up new. So if you have a listing that's kind of flagging, you make a change to the price, it's going to show up on the top of everyone's hot sheet. So basically, if you've got a deal that's flagging, that's a way to make it reappear. Obviously, if it didn't change in any substantive way, you may not have actually made yourself any better, but whatever. Any questions on that?
Yeah, no, everything's self-explanatory. I mean, what I'll do is, once I load it up, I'll have you take a look at it, just like kind of like a preliminary review, just to make sure, it's I'm not missing anything. And then the other question I have too is, so do we have a like showing time account just for to
Oh,
coordinate showings?
yep, yep, yep. And by the way, if you search in the live list within my channel being this one here, Steve Franco REI, you'll see other conversations about how listings go, and in some cases, now these are older versions. They've just updated their software, but you can dig a little bit deeper. But yeah, so let me go back into um, every listing you put up connects to showing time. And I'm glad you brought that up. So let me go to change. Let's see, it may or may not let me mess with showing time on a closed. I might actually have to make a new whatever. Wait, you know what? Did it put it under expired? Did it put Grove under expired? If it will, I can just reuse my own. All Avenue, Oakwood Place. All right, well, he won't get mad at me. Okay, so in here, enable, disable showing time. And this, by the way, showing time is a totally separate, and for those of you who, so I am allowed to let you use my own account on an occasional basis. If you become a regular listing person, you're going to want to get your own account with Scranton Board. That's a whole different conversation. But when working under my name, when borrowing my name, be very careful, like not to screw up, because it all reflects directly back on me. And if I lose my account, then things get really weird. But within showing time, and this is why what you're saying, Steve, is you're entering it and I'm verifying it. That's totally fine, because even though it's your listing, it's your deal. It's still you're helping me, whatever. But this is where you go in and you enter in who the contacts are and whether they get the right to can confirm appointments by, confirm and cancel. Do they have the right to cancel? Others being notified? Whatever. Make sure you're in here as well, because if it's your listing and you're under my account, or we're JVing a deal together, which is technically what when you're using my account, whatever. I don't know about the property. I don't want to get the questions. That doesn't help either one of us. So just make sure you're in here as well. And you can also set up restricted times of when the property can't be shown. Add new showing restrictions, so you can say, don't show on these times, time restrictions. So if your sellers are orthodox or whatever, no showings on Saturday, or from Friday this to Saturday that, or whatever, you can do that. And obviously, coordinating with tenants and so forth. You are allowed to, and actually recommended to, if there are tenants in the property, make sure they're in here as well. You check with the owner or the property manager and say, how do we handle the tenant conversation? In terms of because obviously the tenants need 24 hours notice before they're, in most leases, most agreements and verbal rentals, tenants have to be given 24 hours notice, and most of the time they don't get permission position. However, under Pennsylvania law, they do have the right to reject anything. It is under castle doctrine, basically. They're the tenant, it's their castle, and if they want to tell you to jump in a lake, you can't swim in the lake. Kind of did it one backwards, but whatever. Meaning, yes, a tenant can be a jerk and prevent you from seeing their apartment ever. You then would refer it back to the seller. So I always make sure my tenants' contacts are in here, and they have the right to yes, no, maybe, or if the seller or property manager tell me so, they're in here, and then they have to push with the seller or with the tenant. Where that gets obviously complicated is if it's no, the property manager has to call the tenant. Well, then you have to tell your through your showing time and through your private messages, hey, agents, you can't just do a 24-hour notice because it's going to take the seller or the property manager time to whatever. So when you're dealing with occupied, residential, especially residential, but even commercial rentals, you got to work that out with your seller. You got to work that out with the property manager. You got to know that. And you've got to somewhat, so this is totally an automated process. You can never look at your showing times if you set it up right. Meaning if you set yourself up as a notification, not a decision. But to keep your reputation with other agents and to frankly stop wasting everyone's time, it's good that you're in the loop to watch the appointments to make sure that that someone doesn't drive out from New York with a buyer's agent to discover the tenants aren't letting you in or whatever. Because it's very easy on both sides. One tenant says yes, one tenant says no. Well, the agent might have seen a yes, but not seen the no. So you should be watching it enough to call that agent up and say, hey, just so you know, 1 out of 4 apartments said yes, you can come. The other 3 said no. You still want to come. You're good to go to that one. The other 3, you can look at the building. You can't go in. So that's, but showing time comes as part of the package. And you'll see within showing time, there's messages, which is literally people messaging back and forth about the stuff. People can submit offers. I rarely have that happen. You look at your calendar on either your listings, make new request. I've requested showing cart, and it shows you what all is going on. Obviously, I don't use this a lot, so it's kind of very empty. But you can also see, hey, I asked for this one, and it was canceled. Or somebody asked for this showing, and that was canceled. Or this one, appointment required, confirmed with, whatever. So that's basically, that's kind of how showing time works. And Flex MLS and Showing Time have much better training videos than we do, so they're a good resource for that. Nothing else really on the. Okay, so this automatically, any good MLS board software, database, whatever. And the distinction there is Scranton is a board that has Flex MLS as their MLS software database. What's called Bright is not a board. They are not a member of the Association of Realtors. They are a MLS database. You have to be a member of a board to join them. I think they might have changed that, but they don't. You can't join them and say, "Oh, I'm a member of the Association of Realtors." No. But all of these softwares are basically, this part of it is the MLS. And yes, Scranton board has their little board section that does board stuff, but all of these databases have their specific rules and have their specific notifications or whatever. So when you do a listing, be watching your email for them to send a message and say, you got a problem. And if you let me know when you start, if you list something for me, let me know and I'll set up a forward from my email over to yours so you can see those messages and string them out. But yeah, that's basically, I'm trying to think. I think that's basically it for, and that was where I was going. You put this on Flex or probably Bright or the rest of them, and within, let's say, a day, it'll end up on Zillow, Homes. I had a situation where a seller wanted their listing canceled or withdrawn or whatever. Something changed, fine, it's going away. I took it off Flex, and whatever software it was, I took it off of. And it took a couple days to come off the other services. And there's very little you can do. And so if you have a situation where the seller says to you, hey, I don't see it on Zillow, or hey, I see it on Zillow when it shouldn't be, you just have to explain to them that the control we have is of this, whichever software your board runs off of. We don't have that other level of control. It updates, I assume nightly, but whatever. It updates when it updates. One time in way too many years, that became a question. So just be aware that yes, it goes out to all the other services. Now, the last thing on that topic, scandal-wise, MLS board scandal, whatever year that was, a couple of years ago, that whole settlement with whatever, which by the way didn't actually change anything. In the state of Pennsylvania, there is no standard for buyer agency commission by law. There's no standard for seller agency commission by law. Meaning you can't go, okay, so a seller can say, I want to pay 3% commission, I want to pay 2% commission. I want to pay 1% commission. And which side would you like to pay that to, sir? You got to clarify that. Buyer side, seller side. What are they offering, if anything? Now, you don't have to take the business. You know, we as a brokerage firm or you as an individual can say, under 3% seller side commission, I'm not taking the deal. If they can find another agent, I'm not doing it. Or if they're not going to offer a buyer agency commission because they're not required to, my policy is I don't accept that client because you're a free agent. You're allowed to just accept or not accept a client. Fine. What you can't do now, if we made a company policy, which I don't intend to, that says, hey, we won't do it under X or Y, we can say as a company, we're not doing it. What you can't say is anything like, well, you have to do 3% commission, or the law requires, or the PAR requires. You can say that I don't choose that deal. I had a $7 million listing, which I knew in my heart wasn't going to sell. But the guy's like, it's a $7 million listing, and it was worth it. It just, in the market at the time, I knew it wasn't going to go anywhere. But he's like, I'm only giving you 1% for 120 days, which for me, it's 2.5 in 6 months, or I'm not doing it. But whatever, I said, sure, I'll take it. So we have the right to say yes or no. I had somebody else come to me with a $250,000 listing and said, I want 1%. I said, good luck. We have that right, but we can't enforce on anybody else. The other thing is within that scandal, settlement, whatever, no discussion of commissions for the buyer. I'm not sure why you would post your seller commission, can exist on an MLS. So Flex, Bright, whatever, no. Okay, Bright, again, they're not a board member. Do they have to follow that? I don't know. But you're allowed to put your commission offering to buyer on homes.com, Zillow.com directly, but you can't put it in here. It's literally, you could put it anywhere. You could put it on your website that we always offer, whatever, this listing offers, whatever. But you can't put it on the MLS. There's a fine for that to even discuss buyer side commission. Now, if you're, and I'm just going to cover this for those new agents, and Steve, you may or may not know buyers, but the buyer side, under par rules, and I think you're crazy if you do anything else, you are not supposed to go to a property without having a buyer agency agreement on that property with that buyer. Why do I think you're crazy to do it without one anyway? Is that's the only way you're getting paid. Because, and yes, if you're wholesaling or net listing, it's slightly different, but without that, you can literally get to a closing and they can say, well, you have no buyer agency agreement. I was at a closing. I had done a $3 million closing and everything went fine, whatever. And when I was taking my broker classes, the broker teacher actually used me as an example. Said, Steve, you had this deal, He said, you didn't have a buyer agency agreement. I said, I didn't at the time know what a buyer agency agreement was. He's like, well, they would have every justification at closing to say you're not getting paid. So get those signed. You always want a consumer notice signed by everybody. You, of course, need a listing agreement. Now, consumer notice should happen when you first have the first conversation with them, but at the first substantive is what the law says. Understand with CNs, and this is especially weird in the wholesale world. You're going to be giving them their whatever sales agreement, net listing agreement, whatever you're using, and then a consumer notice. Top of the consumer notice says this is not a contract, and you have to explain to them that's not a contract. This is per whatever rules. And if you're using an assignable contract, you've got to do the 1173 addendum with those 5 points of the 5 stupid things that 1173 gives us rights. And my addendum for wholesales tells them up front, hey, listen, you are choosing speed over money. Doing a traditional listing may or may not result in more money because Article 1 of PAR says that we're supposed to work in our client's best interest, and there's sometimes a fight that best interest is money. But back to the point is that everybody gets consumer notice. Buyer agency agreement is the only way you can guarantee to get paid, because buyer agency agreement literally says the buyer will pay you even if the seller does not. I see every day on these realtor forums, well, my buyer didn't want to sign an agency agreement that got me any kind of money, and the seller doesn't want to give me any kind of money. How do I get paid? Well, good news, Sally, you can't get paid. You didn't protect your own butt. And yes, wholesales are different, but basically make sure you've got those protections in there. If you are dual agency, and again, wholesale is a gray area here, it probably should be acknowledged by all parties that you're a dual agent. Now, the reason wholesale is weird, and in our wholesale addendum it says this, is that you're an agent. I'm a broker. The wholesale world or net listing world doesn't necessarily mean that we're their fiduciary, because they haven't hired us as a listing agent or a buying agent. And it's not, there's no black letter on this anywhere. But we want to be clear that, hey, we're acting on our own behalf here. You agreed to sell your house for 50. If I can get 90 for it, great, I'm taking 90. And we are acting in your best behalf, but we're doing it to move the property the fastest. If you are the dual agency disclosure is just that. You're basically saying, hey, listen, I'm playing both sides. Does a wholesale need it? Yeah, that's still a gray area. I haven't really gotten my attorney to give me a ruling on that yet. On anything else, if you're the listing agent and a buyer calls you and you go out to show with the buyer, yeah, and they sign a buyer agency agreement, then when an offer is made, there's a dual agency acknowledgement somewhere. We write it into the offer, or we use a dual agency document, or whatever. It's also important when you take a listing that you have your consumer notice, your listing agreement, and a seller's estimate of costs that says to the seller, hey, you've agreed to $50,000, whether it's a net listing agreement or it's what you're listing it for, whatever. Here's your costs. Here's what we estimate you're going to walk away with. And it's very important in that document that you, let me pull that up. That's a good thing I should do here. There we go. It's very important that you put in some placeholder of some way, shape, or form to what you believe their mortgages and so forth are. So if we go to documents and we go to, so this is what now we have an off-market non-PAR consumer notice. This is what the PAR consumer notice looks like. And it doesn't really apply to the wholesale world. It has nothing that discusses that. And you all think, which I do as well, why do I need that? But the law predates this other world, and it doesn't change the law. Let's see. So there's a sellers and buyers estimated closing costs. Yes, words are good. And oops, that wasn't supposed to happen. How about we go here? And broker fee, you're reflecting as much as you can for the seller or buyer what their top number is. So if your contract with them is 73,000, boom. Now you have in here the broker fee based on whatever your deal is with them. You're guessing a preparation of deed if they're expected to pay it. What's the transfer tax if they're expected to pay it? Da, da, da. Now we get down here to other, and I always add something like this. That title, liens, mortgages, whatever, there is a number. I refer to these documents on the buyer's side as, I don't know what these numbers are. Clearly, I don't know. I don't know what the filing fees are. That's not my job. But I'm saying to them, hey, listen, there is a number. Okay, preparation of deed. I have $200 in every transaction I send out. And I tell them, I don't know what your deed prep person is going to charge you. Just know a lot of them are $200. So what I tell them is that this is a guess based on best information. I don't know what your mortgages are unless you tell me, and you may not know what they are. So all you're doing with the seller's estimate of closing costs is saying, hey, if you agree to 73,000, you're walking out with something less than 73,000. On the buyer side, if you agree to 73,000, you're spending more than 73,000 by some number. And we're taking a reasonable shot at what that number is. And the seller understands that blah, 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 best estimated costs, whatever. The additional documents, again, this is following PAR rules and everything else, but the additional documents that you're going to have is a deposit money notice when the buyer puts their deposit in. Again, off market rules are, I'm not sure which ones of these are laws, but we never do these. But that deposit money notice is saying, hey, this is how your deposit's handled, this is how you get it back. If you are making money on the lending or on the title, there is a need to disclose that in writing and have parties sign off on that. So we have an ancillary income document that you pretty much signed everybody and say, yeah, I led you to that lender, and shockingly enough, I'm getting paid by that lender. And no one gives a crap, but we have to disclose it. So there's two disclosures that go with every property, basically, that you do. And this must be filled out by the seller and signed off by the buyer. The one is the lead disclosure. And this is not Realtor World. This is federal law. Says every residential property, and I define that as anywhere where anyone sleeps, even if it's mixed use or commercial and there's one apartment, I make them do this. Built before 1978, and personally, I make them do it on every deal. Because I'm not going to have an argument of, oh, the building looks like it was built in 1990. Well, actually, it was built in 1970. And you were just wrong. They're sleeping somewhere, do the damn lead disclosure. And unless they've had a test, we all know every building built before 1978 has lead in it because they didn't have non-lead paint before 1978. So unless they have a test, you have no knowledge, you have no records. Seller, buyer, acknowledgements, agent's acknowledgements, whatever. This comes with up to a $33,000 fine, or at least it used to be 33, for the agent. Another 33 for the broker. I think something like that. EXP gave me really scary numbers. And this is the disclosure statement. By the way, we have versions of these for off market, which are much simpler, but they ask the same questions. PAR has gone lawyer crazy with these stupid little checkboxes. We have a much simpler disclosure, which is like the 10 questions that the state wrote, and little fill-in boxes. I might not have one on this computer. Oh, that's interesting. See, 1173 addendum. So I don't see the off-market disclosure on this computer, but just so you see it, and it's not going to open on this one, is it? Never mind. So that's pretty much the 1173 disclosure. Tells them they have their 30 days to change their mind. They have the right to an appraisal and change their mind based on the appraisal. They have the right to change their mind because they don't like the color of your shoes on the day of closing. It happened within 30 days. whatever. That, if you're doing an assignable deal, those 5 statements, which are called for by law, have to be in your agreement or in the addendum. That's the reason we have the addendums. So that's basically it. If you are listing a net listing, meaning a wholesale that you're using our net listing agreement for, you cannot, on an assignable, just assume you have the right to list it. Our net listing agreement gives you the right to list it. In that case, when you make your listing, it's going to ask you what kind of listing it is, and that is your choice, net listing. If you have any questions on that, we can cover that. But basically, this is kind of the listing process. We do hold deposits. Honestly, I don't care. I would actually prefer not to be the one holding the deposit. I am quite happy when someone says, hey, the attorney or title company is holding deposit. All I need is proof that a deposit was put in there. And that's where we get into the last little piece of this, and I won't go too deep, but dot loop. Dot loop is, again, dot loop has much better training on dot loop than I will ever make. But within here, I'll pick on this one. This is where you either use your template. This is where you get your documents signed, whether you pull them from our template categories, which we will set up templates for you if you want us to, or you can use ours or whatever. And this is where you get everything signed, everything comes home again. And this is where, if whoever's holding deposit, we get an email from the title company, yes, we're holding $5,000. Great, PDF that up and shove it in here. And there's lots more. You can set up your calendar. You can set up your checklist to make sure you get everything. You can set up little reminders and calendar on this and whatever. Let's see if she signed this one real quick. But basically, anything important goes in here, and you add to this list what they call a loop. Wait a minute. How this? Did she sign it? I'll have to check on that later. So you add in here anything important that's happening. You add all the other people playing the game. You add the seller. You add the buyer. You add the title company. You add the buyer's agent. You add whoever else, or blah, blah, blah. That way, the system, you have the ability through the system to sorry, my brain just locked up. You have the ability through the system to communicate with everyone, and you can send contracts out to everyone to get signed, get reviewed, whatever. Whole different training, whole different thing. But this is kind of the center of our world in terms of keeping track of everything. And when you think a file is ready, as a listing, as showings, as whatever, when you think it's time that, hey, listen, Steve, I got everything together, I'm ready. This is where I'm going to look. And this is where I'm going to say, hey, this is what you're missing, this is what you're not missing, whatever, or my VA will, or the AI will, or whatever. This is sort of the center of our world. No, I don't really want anyone using their own third-party signing software. We can maybe discuss that on a case-by-case basis, but the reason for that is one of the reasons I let an agent go last month is because we got to closing, not on just one deal, but he did this on another deal, and said, hey, we just closed yesterday. I said, well, that's interesting. Where's anything? Well, I have it. Okay, great. I need it. Well, where's my money? Well, when I get it and I review it and I'm sure I have everything, then I'll release your money. And we went through about 2 months of this, and he just totally didn't get the idea that the agent isn't the one state required to hold these documents. The broker is, and for periods of time, and for periods from when they were signed. I'm required to hold them. So like, let's use this for signing everybody. Basically, that's why I've invested in the software. So that's pretty much it. Any missing questions? Any remaining items?
Yeah, so you mentioned about putting in I guess mentioning that is like for my deal example, it's a net listing agreement. You want me to put that in the listing description as far as what kind of deal that is, or like where do you want me to put that?
Yeah. So on listing, and this, and I haven't done. I don't do a lot. I don't do a lot of these. So let me go through and see where it is in the new version. Come on. I'll find my address. Okay, fine. I better use my own. I better use my own address. Fine. Use this location. Yes. Fine. Use this location. Next. Next. Listing information. Listing member, co-listing member, tax ID. Somewhere in here it asks, and I'll just hopefully get to where it asks it. Address, fine, city, state, I think it's on the next page. Listing contract date, property subtype, status, listing agreement, net.
Wait, so on the drop down under in the listing agreement row, that's where you're gonna
Yep,
put under select one net listing.
yep, yep.
Gotcha. Okay, I see it now. Yeah, there was some
Yeah,
delay. All right,
yeah,
now
yeah.
now the estimated settlement, like the estimated like settlement
Closing
sheet,
costs.
yeah, the closing costs. Do you want us to do that on every net listing or just ones that are listed on the MLS?
I advise doing it on everything you sign. Um, and if it's very often, I mean, I won't use the par thing very often. I will simply put somewhere in the contract, or whatever, saying to the seller, "Hey, you know that where it outlines the same numbers. It'll say, and I can actually make this part of the contract if you want, where it says, "Hey, you know, you agreed to 50 grand. If your mortgages are $10,000 and that's all you're paying, you're getting 40 grand." Is it necessary? I don't know. But what I never want to get in the catch 22 is that we get to closing and the seller's like, "No, he told me that it was 50 grand and he was paying off all the liens." Now, yeah, your contract says they're paying off the liens. That's great. It's hidden up there, the part nobody ever reads. But if I do this math, I stick an initials next to it, or I use a document like this one. That way, there can never be a pissing match. And that's the other reason where in here, well, not here. What's the estimated closing cost? Here, I say our unknown title company to detail. Because I was literally driving to a closing one day, and the seller was walking out with $3,000. They thought they were going to walk out with 30, because the title company found a $27,000 mortgage that the seller claimed they didn't know about. And he's like, "Well, I'm not signing." I said, "Well, that's going to be very complicated for you because you said you'd clear the liens, and here's a lien." And he's like, "Well, that wasn't on your estimate." I said, "Well, yeah, what was on my estimate is unknown title company to detail, because I can't know when I meet you and you tell me there's one mortgage. I can't know that." So we ended up closing. He ended up basically, he called an attorney, and the attorney's like, "Yeah, suck it up. Too bad you lose." But he went so far as to call an attorney and try to make all sorts of hay. And if I hadn't had, I did use par on that one. If I hadn't had that, if I'd skipped that line, I don't know. Because in the contract it says you're paying off liens, but I figured this avoids fights, basically. Is it legally required? I don't know. I don't know that level. I simply do it. Um, so long answer to your question is it's ideal to do it on all transactions. If you don't, contract still says you're paying off liens, so it's still probably okay. The question is how much of an argument does it take to get to there? You know, I was able to show him, here's where contract said you're clear liens. Here's where I estimated this and said I didn't know what you had for mortgages. You told me you had one. You had three. He's like, well, how would I know that? I said, don't know. You signed for them. Your name's on the signatures. But if you and that's also why we don't touch beyond this. We don't touch answers, and we have lots of unknowns in here because all we're going off of is they told us they were a year behind in taxes, and we find out later they're 4 years behind in taxes. We don't know this. We don't do title searches. I mean, some agents do. Some agents go in and have the subscription and they pay for it and they look up everybody's liens and whatever. I don't for two reasons. One is I just don't. I don't want the liability of giving final answers. And two is the only liens you're going to see on those courthouse searches, unless you do a full title search, is going to be the delinquent taxes because you're going to the delinquent tax office. So we're not so. Long way of saying, like, I always try to leave it where, hey, listen, we're giving you the best guess. And Steve, you've done enough of these. Usually the seller's like, oh crap, yeah, well, I guess I'm getting less.
So I definitely understand. You made some very great points. Yeah, we could just like add this to, or even like a more simplified version to maybe to the end of like the net listing agreement. The only thing is too is like when you're dealing with like counties like Wilkes-Barre, Scranton. I know we were dealing with this, like finding estimated taxes. It's just such a pain. It's like such a pain in the ass to find. Um, so like unless it's already like a previous listing in Flex, like it's almost like really difficult to like find unless like we have title pull it up.
Yeah, and that's also where I'm also very vague when I name taxes. Like let's say I know the taxes from the last listing are $1,500. On the buyer and seller estimations, whatever, I put in the full 1,500, and for both of them. Meaning, seller, you might be losing 1,500. Buyer, you might be paying 1,500. And I have that whole same kind of unknown title company detail thing. And I tell them verbally, I'm like, listen, every county is different. Every municipality is different. In Luzerne County, there are 3 tax bills that come out 3 times of the year that cover 3 different portions of the year. And I might be 364 days prorated on one, and I may be 180 prorated on the other. And I'm like, I just tell everyone point blank, I'm not that smart. Title companies have the computers for this. And so I'm putting this number in. I'm hoping it's too fat in the wrong direction. But I'm not, all of this is us saying, hey, listen, and I say this that simply. I say, if you buy a toy at Walmart, you're getting out the door for more than that toy has a sticker for. You're the buyer, you're paying more. Walmart knows they have expenses in selling it to you, and they're getting less than that toy is stickered for. The whole purpose of these agreements, of these itemizations, is just that, warning them that, hey, there's numbers that exist, and we're taking a random guess at them. And I tell them, now, what you can do on taxes is, and this is still an estimate, I would never die on this hill. I don't like dying on any hill. I'm way too type Z to be a typical agent. But there are standard millage rates published. There's a chart put out every year of the millage rates, city, municipal, county, school, whatever, for every municipality in Pennsylvania. And you can download that, and you can do the millage rates math, and you can back into a pretty good estimation of the taxes. Do I do that? Hardly ever. And even if I did, I would still couch it in all of the warnings, because for lots of reasons, not the least of which is I don't know if Susquehanna County has 3 different tax bills on 3 different parts of the year. Lackawanna County, as far as I know, is once. It's everything is January 1st. Would make life much easier if the rest of the world would work like that. So yeah, so we'll work in a section for this, and just you just tell, and that's why it says, and you make sure you always say to them verbally as well, we're doing our best guess here. The other question which came up on some folks out west who are Western PA who are actually they're members of a wholesale franchise, I guess, for lack of a better term. And their franchise operators questioned the whole idea of disclosures, even though it was show them that the state their franchise is from also requires disclosures, so they shouldn't be surprised by this. But I always tell people 2 things on disclosures. You get pushback on that. Because what I'm telling you as is where is, yes, and in the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors sales contract, it says as is where is. But first of all, disclosures are a matter of fairness. And I say to people, listen, wouldn't you like to know everything the seller knows about a property you're buying? That's all we're asking. But the second example I give is I had a buyer have rotten eggs after the sale. They found something out that was called out in the disclosures. I forget what the actual item was. And it wasn't what was explained in the disclosure. And they called me up and they're like, I think we should sue. I said, well, first of all, once you said that word, I refer you to an attorney. I'm the broker for the deal that's closed, and I'm out of this. We all did our shows, and it's over. I'll guide you, but. And he's like, well, what do you think? I said, I think you're going to lose. He's like, why? I said, because they filled out the disclosure. Now you have to prove they lied on the disclosure. He's like, so what would be the other alternative? I said, if they haven't given you a disclosure, they would have withheld a material fact because they never gave one. And then the agent's in trouble, and the broker is in trouble, and the person who didn't fill out the form is possibly in trouble as well. And I said, so if they didn't give you a disclosure and you found this out later, you could say the reason they didn't is because they were trying to hide something they knew about, and then everybody's lawyers get excited. But because they filled out a disclosure and they said they are not a licensee, they said they're not experts, best of our knowledge, now you got to prove they lied. And okay, good luck with that. I'm not even a spectator in that show. I can't help you. So that's when people push back on disclosures. And yes, we can hide things. Like you'll notice in our net listing agreement, it says, or in our net listing agreement, it says disclosures are waived, and it says no knowledge of lead. I don't know, and my attorney can't even tell me if that's enough. So we do disclosures. In our lead disclosure, it's all about the lead. It's the EPA generic non-PAR version of what I showed you. Basically, we're talking about copyright design issues more than anything else. And in my disclosure, it has a mini lead thing. Has knowledge, has no knowledge. Has records, has no records. I will never let anyone just do the disclosure with those checkboxes, because I don't know if hidden somewhere in EPA's laws is you have to use our form and our question. So basically across the board, all of this is covering our butts and making sure that we're making sure that we're passing it on downstream as safe as possible. And we're also protecting, even though they could be considered our customer, not our client, we're protecting them as well. Next.
Yeah, no, that's it.
Okay. Yeah. So that's basically it. And obviously there may be some things I forgot about in here. So your last thing I want to cover is when you use dotloop. Now here's the software that you guys have through us, which many of you who've been doing this for a while. We have a Go High Level membership, which is a company level membership, You don't want to pay for a CRM, you can use it. It's the same silo as I'm using. It's kind of a share, but whatever. You could also buy your own Go High Level membership through us at a discount. We have batch leads. We keep going back and forth whether we're going to use batch leads or PropStream, but whatever. We have one of those. We have our own
same company now, so I've
yeah.
yeah, it doesn't matter. I use PropStream, so.
Yeah. Did they even have a competitor now that they've merged?
So they have Deal Machine is a competitor. I'm trying to think of other ones right off the
I mean,
top.
Deal with me and Propfire,
Um,
I know about those two.
Deal
Yeah.
Deal Sauce, which is Pace Morby's software.
Okay.
So they have a few competitors, but obviously Batch was probably Prop's biggest one.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So we have that. We also have our own suite of AIs, estimators, and tools, and one of our AIs, the Baby Analyzer, which we're releasing next month. And I want you guys to play with it if you could, and just kind of tell me where it's on track and screws up. But Batch, the Baby actually does comping, and it does some property estimation based on pictures. But really, the one that I care about you using is dot loop, and that's it. Now the other thing is, um, last part is don't rely on any software. Don't let ChatGPT tell you what something's worth. Don't let Zillow's estimate tell you what something's worth. If you put something in dot loop to be reminded about, don't assume dot loop did it. If you hire a VA or a transaction coordinator, or you're using our company one or whatever, that's all great, but nothing negates your human job of making sure the stuff that has to get done gets done, both in terms of a justification to the brokerage, justification to the board, justification to the client, or just running your business. If you set something like this signature that the client on this other deal said they signed it late last night, I still need to put eyes on it, because did the signature take? Did Dotloop eat it? Did they not hit that final yes, I approve being an electronic signature thing? Nothing replaces our responsibility of doing it. And basically, responsibility rolls downhill. When I get it and I review it and I say, hey, this isn't right, I go back to the agent and say, make it right. And the agent, which is this other gentleman, said to me, well, it's not my fault that the DocuSign didn't take it in right. I said, actually, it kind of is. It's kind of your job to make sure stuff gets completed. And I'm not at all pointing at anyone. I'm just saying that we can all love technology, but to really screw things up requires some form of computer, and we just have to be like, okay, you know what, it's ours. And even to the point of um, even to the point of of communicating with other things. Oh yeah, that's so, like if you're the seller, if your client is required to do something in 15 days, like an inspection period, if you don't remind them and say, hey, inspection period's up in 5 days, 4 days, 3 days, 2 days, and stay on them, and it just drifts past, and you get to day 16, first of all, they've lost the rights given to them in that calendar, because pretty much especially the PAR contract says after 15 days, they've accepted the property without inspection. They can inspect it on the 16th day. They can hate every damn thing about it. It can be the worst house in the world. Too bad their deposit no longer gets refunded based on inspection because they missed it. And you were part of the process that missed that. Now, if you're emailing them, and this is where, if you're getting down to that line, PDF that and stick it in Dotloop. Track the proof. And that also comes to the last thing I wanted to cover, which is the marketing. And I think I can pull this up on, I've never logged in on here, so never mind. Anyway, so basically the marketing laws in Pennsylvania say that anytime, and if you have a qualified association registered, it's the qualified association, not necessarily your name. But whether you're advertising under, Stephen Herring, or you're advertising under Manifest Investors, and it's on a card, it's on a flyer, it's on your voicemail technically, it's on any advertising medium whatsoever, every document that goes out the door has to have Guerrilla Real Estate and the 798 phone number equally prominent. And the state doesn't define what that means, but let's go with the ruling of same font size and type and boldness, same size, And same contrast. Like I saw an example in a training class one time where it was both 24 point, whatever, bold, something. Agent was yellow on black. Brokerage was dark gray on black. Instantly not the same prominence, not as obvious. The state requires that, and also, by the way, requires the equal housing symbol, that little house with the equal sign in it, in everything. The state requires that for two reasons, and I've had both reasons happen. One is if somebody's upset with you, they need to easily be able to find the brokerage. Or if somebody can't reach you, and again, this agent who I asked to remove himself from the company, one of the reasons was, one of my first experiences with him was I got a call the day before closing from a buyer's agent on a transaction I knew nothing about because he hadn't submitted anything. And they can't reach him for the last 3 days. And they don't know if the seller's on board. They don't know, yada, yada, yada. And she's asking me, and I'm like, I'm trying my best to solve it, but I know how about the soup, but that wasn't the problem. The good part was that at least my information was in place. And also, this is why our contract specifies brokerage name and everything. Same agent, unfortunately. You can now get an idea why he's no longer with us. During this time of darkness, which turned out to be a medical condition for him, so I'm not picking on him for what happened. But I called up the title company on another transaction of his, and title company refused to give information. And we're trying to close this, and I'm trying to jump in and try to figure out which end is up. And I had to, explain to the title company, and this is the last thing I'll mention, is that you're the agent. You are the pin in the chain. But as far as the state is concerned, every contract is with the brokerage. So everybody in the chain needs to know who we are just by being on the contract. You don't have to be or whatever. We do have a separate email address if you want to copy us on everything. It's not my Steve at. I'll give it to you. You don't have to. But the point is that if something happens and I have to jump in and swim, I need all the tools. That's what .loop is for. And that marketing law. And the last thing I'll say on that, I had this discussion with EXP when I was over there, and they're very type A, so I trust their explanations. They've got a huge support department. But she said, technically your personal home voicemail is supposed to have your brokerage on it. I said, huh? She's like, look, no one does it. Absolutely no one does it. But she's like, technically it says anytime you're saying anything, the world can hear you. So we don't have to go stupid absurd, but we have to be somewhat reasonable about making sure that people have an easy way of reaching the brokerage. So all I'm saying is when you're marketing, don't forget the equal housing logo. Don't forget the brokerage information. Run your design or whatever by me is fine. Now, as far as those of you designing cards or whatever, like Steve, I know you're converting your cards over. I don't care what the cards look like. I don't care if the gorilla's on there. I care gorilla real estate and the phone number. I had a long, protracted thing with EXP because I didn't want their look of cards when I was with them. And the broker, and this is kind of my rule too, I want to approve the look. I want to be sure that what you're putting out there is right. Now, once you've made a format for your Facebook ads or whatever, fine. I'm not like they were, I have to sign off physically on every one, like they actually had a whole process. But on anything important, bounce it by me. But I don't care what it looks like. Literally, I wish we were in a state which said I had to exist, but I didn't have to equally prominent. Because I can't tell you the number of times that agents will call me and ask me questions about properties. I'm like, dude, I'm just a broker. You're calling the wrong person. You need to call this other number, which I'm fine with, no problem. But just when you're designing your stuff, equal prominence, and don't forget the equal housing logo. And the last topic on equal housing, and we can all have our own feelings about the Luzerne County anti-discrimination ring, which doesn't really apply here, but kind of. But there's federal discrimination laws and there's state discrimination laws about water protected classes. My opinion, okay, so a couple things. If it's a protected class, we make no weight whatsoever. And what do I define as a protected class personally? What do I guide our teams to do is everything's a protected class. I can't keep track of, nor do I think any of these should be discriminated against, is gender, is orientation, is sexuality, is, all the different things that people are defining themselves as now. I think that we assume they're all protected classes because it is far better to assume they are than to find out they were and you didn't think they were. So any conversation I had to walk through the day of closing, final walkthrough with a buyer, and the tenant was of one nationality and the buyer was Indian, and the tenant started making racial comments about just races. I forget exactly what it was, and I looked at my buyer and I said, "We can't have this conversation. We're done here." And the tenant said, "Well, this is just my opinion." I said, "Sir, you can have it, not in my presence, not until the sale is done. We're out." And I just walked my buyer up and down the stairs. The other thing is, and this is state law, this is not PAR, steering, redlining, all of those things, and you guys learned about them in your classes. I'm going to give you an example where a friend of mine who has been owning over 100 units since 1981. So to say he has experience in this, yeah. This conversation was like 2012, so it had happened recently to that. And he'd been doing it for whatever, fine. He's showing an apartment, and they brought their kids, and their kids were unruly. And, it just, for whatever reason, he said something to the effect of, "I think you would be happier in my other building across town. There are more families." And as he describes it, there was a building in Wilkes-Barre. He lives in Kingston. Before he got home, his lawyer was on the phone and said, "Jim, drive to my office right now with a $15,000 check." "Why?" "Did you say this?" "Yes, I did." "Drive here with a check now." Because what Jim meant was an honest, "I think you'd be happier." The tenant, who may have been a real tenant or may have been a spy for the state, and yes, they exist, felt it was steering, felt it was discriminatory. And there it was. Jim, as far as I know, is not racist, did not really care. Just, there it was. The words of, "By the way, we also have this apartment. I would not mention the children. Don't do anything that looks like you're steering." I don't even say, and I know there are laws in there, but I don't say it's a one-bedroom apartment, it's only good for 2 people. You can't say that. There's codes on how many people per square foot and but we don't touch those things. We say, this is, we can't make judgments like that. And there are areas where we probably could. I choose not to because I choose not to face lawyers and discrimination lawsuits. And if you're not sure if you're thinking of something as a protected class, or maybe you're not, assume it is, because none of us need the lawyers. So that's all I got. And one last thing on material fact, by the way, is we are experts, like it or not, even if you're a brand new agent. I had a seller one time who had a big crack in his foundation, but it was big but hidden. And I said to him, "Well, this is non-disclosure." He said, "Yeah, I'd rather not anyone be told that." And I said, "Not the way it works. It can't. I've seen it. I have to point it out and let them decide about it." On the flip side is you're walking through a house and you see the white stuff wrapped around the pipes that's corrugated. Someone's going to say to you, "Is that asbestos?" And you say, "I don't know. If you're concerned, feel free to hire an expert. It's a white product wrapped around a pipe is all I can tell you." I, in my own case, had a deal get screwed up with a house I owned and sold and was also buyer agent, which don't do all three. Except wholesale world, I know you kind of are, but whatever. Disclosed the crap out of that, by the way. My broker was even though he knew it happened, he was very upset that I was all three players. But an inspector came through, basement ceiling was 12 feet up, maybe 15. Inspector said, "There's mold up there." And I called the inspector's company ownership and said, "You can't make a determination like that from 12 feet away. You can say there's a growth. you can't determine what that growth is until you get your ass up there and have a scientist test it. We don't step out of our lanes. And on that, and we do this all the time, we always write things in contracts. But there's be cautious of practicing the law without a license. And always when I write something into a contract, I put at the bottom, parties should consider if they want to have an attorney review this before signing, written by an agent. A lot of this is just cover our asses, make sure no one assumes anything. That's all I got. Any other questions? All right, that's it. And Steve, I don't know if whoever needs to see it, this will be appearing, actually it already is appearing, right here in the live folder. I think it also eventually merges over to the.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.